Welcome, welcome. We have another episode of The Weird Way, and this one may be weirder than most so far.
Are we recording?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Sorry.
And that's okay. This is why it's going to be weird. I am excited, Nat. You are one of my favorite people because you are the embodiment of weird. And just to frame this, you are a 5D energetics coach and business mentor, and you do some incredible work. And one of the reasons I'm really excited for this conversation is because I've been able to witness so much of your growth over the last year of knowing you, and you've inspired me, you've called me forward in my own life, and that has meant a lot to me to see someone who's in this world willing to claim themselves so deeply. Like we've just jammed for about an hour by ourselves before. Some of it could have been on this podcast.
So much of it could have been on here. I was like, Dean, we should be recording this. This is fucking brilliant.
And I was like, yeah. And then we touched on some other things that didn't
yes,
want
we
to get on.
don't want to do that.
So no, we couldn't do that. But I'm excited for
Thank
this
you.
conversation. It is a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's so nice to like see you in your full expression as well. Like both of us have come so far in the past year, and it's been so beautiful to also watch your journey. So yay us! We're amazing. Yeah?
We are. And like one of the reasons is because I think a big part for both of us on this journey has been we've really embraced who we are, and that's a big part of this podcast. Like it's called The Weird Way. It's like being your weird self. And I feel like the more I've seen you journey, I've seen more expression of you, more ability to be like, this is who I am in this world. And that has been mirrored by your success and your ability to create and bring your gifts to this world. And I think that fact of full ownership is something that is so deeply needed in this world and what is healing for the world. So I'm curious about that journey for yourself of like, I know there's been in the last year a lot more growth in business sense, but that you've also been on this path for quite a long time yourself. And I imagine there's been stages along the way where it's been like, oh, I've got to own my gifts. I've got to own my weirdness.
Own it all, yeah.
And so what has that been like for you?
Yes. Okay, great question. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Natalie Patterson. I have been running my business now for close to 2 years. I had a big spiritual awakening about 6 years ago. And about 3 years ago now, I started speaking light language. So for those of you who don't know what light language is, it is this very high frequency running through my body from source energy. I connect into source and I channel through my hands some really weird codes, almost look like a little dance, and I say some kind of like tribally things out of my mouth. And so when this started happening, this was by far the most weird thing that I have ever experienced. And I wanted to do it for so long. And I was watching so many other people on YouTube doing light language, and I had craved to do it. And so when I started doing it, I was like, oh my God, I've got the gift. I've got the gift. And I was like, fuck yeah, I want to share this with the world. And I remember feeling a little bit ashamed though. I was like, oh, it's so fucking weird. It's so obscure. It's so unusual. And it's not a thing, right? This is 3 years ago, where now I feel like a lot of people that we know, you know, being spiritual embodied people, a lot of people now speak light language, where 3 years ago it just wasn't a thing. So when I really owned my weirdness was when I really came online with all my spiritual gifts of, you know, I started seeing aliens, and I started seeing spirit guides, and I started seeing spirits, and I started seeing dragons, and I was like, all right, this is pretty fucking weird, and I've got to own all of this because this is who I truly am. I've been denying my spiritual ability and my spiritual gifts for such a long time when I've been on my big spiritual journey and awakening. And really 3 years ago, I remember, you know, I was in a training room, and my spirit guide said, you've got to get on stage and you've got to do light language. And there was 124 people in the room. And I was like, there's no fucking way I'm speaking on stage. Like, I'm sitting at the back, not talking to people because I'm nervous and I'm scared. There's no way I'm speaking on stage. And my spirit guides were like, the next piece of your puzzle is actually to get on stage. So I said to the lady, I said, can I get on stage and share some light language? She's like, well, I don't really know about that. And I was like, I know I have to do this. So, of course, Spirit must have intervened. And the next day she was like, yep, you can go on stage and speak about light language. And I was like, okay. So I get on stage, so nervous, close my eyes flicker to the back of my head, weird stuff comes out of my mouth and I start doing my light language with my hands. And I'm like, all right, I'm really owning my weirdness. And I remember in the room, people were looking at me like, what the fuck? And I remember people kind of like avoiding me, being like, this girl is so weird. And I was like, all right, I'm owning who I am. I'm this weird chick that speaks light language. And then so it kind of became a thing. People started asking me about it. And then the more they asked me and got curious, the more I was like, I'm actually cool. This is actually really cool, guys. I'm really cool, I promise. And so it was like this, and actually we spoke about this just before the podcast. It was like this huge thing that I had to prove, right? I always felt like I had to prove myself and my weirdness. I didn't just naturally sit into like, hey, this is who I really am. Probably for like 6 to 8 months. And then I decided to start a TikTok account, and one of my videos went viral. I had 1.4 million views, and it kind of just like popped up overnight, and I had heaps of people bagging me out. And it was in that moment that I chose to see someone bagging me out as actual success. I was like, you know what? More people that bag me out and tell me I look stupid and tell me that I'm fake and telling me that I'm a dickhead, the more they do that, the more the algorithm gets bigger and bigger, and the more people get to see light language and experience light language. So it made me so excited that more people got to witness the frequency of light language, and they got to witness my weirdness. And then I was like, fuck yeah, I'm going to get famous for being weird. Yes! And so I like wanted to own it. So I kind of actually became an ego thing, right? I then started to be like, I channel aliens, and I'd look at people's reactions because I just wanted to kind of fuck with them. And then I was like, oh my God, Natalie, you're coming from ego. Calm down, right? So I've been on a huge journey, Dean, to be like, I'm spiritual, I'm weird, I do all these weird things that are totally unconventional, and I now love who I am. And I now have blended the fact that I also do desire to have this wealthy life, and I do desire to have all these beautiful things, where we were also saying this just before the podcast. I was choosing to reject that version of me for such a long time because I wanted to be spiritual and fit in with my spiritual friends. And then I created this new identity of like, actually, I am this businesswoman that does earn really good money, and I can do all these awesome things. So it's been lots of transitions over the last probably 3 years of this big spiritual awakening of owning and being okay with all of my big weirdness.
I love you embracing all of your big weirdness. And like, I think that piece around permission is so big. And that there's a topic I want to go into because I believe not a lot of people are aware of this. When people are willing to shine their weirdness and shine their light, what can happen is there's a lot of energy directed at them, whether this is positive, negative, whatever it is. And like for myself, you had a video go viral, which for me is like, oh, the system is now open and a lot more energy is coming into your space, good, negative, whatever it is. And there's an alchemical process that needs to occur to transmute that. So no longer it's like, which it sounds like you went through of, like some of it's negative, people bagging you out and actually wanting to attack you for owning your weirdness. And, this is what I think a lot of people are afraid of, and especially women, we go to witch hunts and all of this where it's like, oh, you stepping outside the box too much, we're going to shut you down and we're going to like put you back where you belong and we're going to try and keep you there. And so that process of like, oh, I get to own my weird and like the alchemical transmutation that occurred in that.
It was expansion, right?
Yeah. Like that journey in itself, what was that like in the inner worlds of being like, oh, people are saying this about me, and it was also your responsibility because, it is only on us to transmute that. What was that like on the internal?
Yeah, good question. So the first couple of comments, kind of was like a stabbing in the heart, like, oh my God, they hate me, they don't like me. And my people pleaser was like, oh my God, they don't like me. And then it was like, actually, hold on a second. Of course, I want to transmute everything with love. So how can I see this in more love? Of course, more people are going to see light language. So then I got really excited by it. So I think the more I got excited by it, the more expansion started to happen. And then literally overnight, it was like literally 1.4 million people had seen it. And I was like, this is fucking wild. So in me, the shift that had to occur was that this is so exciting and this gets to be expansive. And actually I get to responsibility, I get to see this as love. I get to see this as openness. I get to see this as helping more humans. And then I play that, and I suppose I put that out into every area of everything that I do. Even at the start of this year, I went through a big transition of not really speaking about how much money I'd made in my business to speaking about how much money I made in business, and it being a bit scary to put that online. I was like, telling people that I'm making 6 figures a month, like that's a lot. And people, like the expansion of that is completely different. And I felt really weird. And I suppose I had to go through a big shift there as well of doing the same thing of like seeing that this is actually going to help people, and it will polarize people. If people either love me or hate me, that's okay, because my people will find me and they will follow me and they will be inspired by the fact that I can show up as my authentic self. And then the more self-expression codes I end up, receiving and giving, the more I come into myself, the more money I end up making, the more happiness I end up feeling. And then I'm like, everything kind of flows into alignment. This is great. So now I love teaching everyone to be their weird self, be so open, allow themselves to go to the depth of who they are, and have that alchemical shift, I suppose. But the only person that can do that is themselves, right? The only person that could have done that was me. So yeah, it was a expansion. I keep wanting to go back to the word expansion. Yeah.
When you said that, them first couple words, it really felt like the catalyst kicked in. It was like, there's the words coming at me. They're negative, and like the energy was intention to attack, and you catalyzed that to actually change that, which allowed that to go viral. It was like, I'm open to this. I can hold this. I can transmute the energy that comes through me. And there was this deep internal shift that allowed you to open to that and be like, I'm willing to hold this. I'm willing to be this so other people can experience this and also be a catalyst for the collective as well. Because like we are talking about stepping into a new identity, sharing how much money you made in business. And like for myself, I'm looking at what I call an identity shift I'm going through at the moment, where I'm like, I'm teaching more. I'm stepping into more of a creator role. I'm still being a coach, but I'm going through this shift in identity, which means like, I'm looking at all the areas I have shame around, and it's like, for me, it's like, I've been in business for 4 years, and there was like, the shame around not being further and being like, there's a contraction there for me. So my practice has been to open to the shame, to allow myself to be seen in that, and allow that to be the catalyst to transmute. And it's like, if we can open to the layers where we hold shame in whatever they are, if it's like a shame of not being good enough, a shame of earning too much, a shame of not earning enough, and being like, this is where I am. For me, this element of coming into truth, being like, this is true for me.
This is true for me. Yes, guys. We were literally just talking about this, guys. It's like that authenticity piece of telling and expressing who you are.
Yeah. Because
all of who you are is this expansion. And interesting that you said about that, like you're going through this big identity shift. I'm going through the same thing, and I think maybe could be a collective thing as well. A lot of people are also feeling the shift, and we all moving through, like, for us to evolve to the next version of ourselves, it's almost like another version of us has to die, right? And it feels a bit weird. Feels a bit weird, doesn't it? It's a weird way, would you say?
A very weird way. Death and rebirth.
Yes, it's huge. It's huge, hey?
And I always feel the phoenix in that, where it's like, I burn to the ashes. And like I did an email about this not long ago, and I was looking back on my life and seeing, how many times I feel like my identity has died, like an ego death in a sort of like, I started on this journey. I was a good boy, the good guy. And I started down the engineer path, and I was like, I'm an engineer. And then that died when I turned into the spiritual hippie. And then that died when I turned into the businessman and like and coach and all of this. And it's like, I find that process gets easier and easier to allow death in and be like, it's ready for this stage to die. Yeah. And I'm curious about your own journey with that, because it feels like, hey, you have gone through a death this year.
So I think this year I've been through 2 big deaths. So at the start, so in December, guys, Dean and I saw each other. We went to Mount Tambourine. We both birthed ourselves through this massive fucking tree. We both climbed up this massive tree. How big do you reckon the tree was?
It was 20 to 30 meters high, above the canopy of the forest, and no safety gear, just climbing up the middle of this fig tree. It was a beautiful experience.
It was a beautiful experience, and I was I was just going through a breakup then, so I was like so emotional, and I had our friend Chris above me and then Dean behind me, both of them encouraging me, and I was like, this is so scary. So I went through this massive identity death when I went through, a breakup. It's so deep when you're like, okay, I've been with this person for such a long time, and I've been this way with him, and so that was a really big identity death. And from the tree, I then went to Bali, and I lived in Bali for about a month and a half. And whilst I was in Bali, I went through this massive identity of like, who am I? Like, who am I here to serve? Like, what am I meant to do here? Like, now that I've just broken up with this man, I've got so much time again. Like, who the fuck am I? So I then created this plan in Bali. From Bali, I went to Melbourne to visit my family for Christmas, and I ended up on the plane over, I wrote down every single thing that I wanted to do this year, and I was like, I want to be a millionaire. Like, I've never claimed that or owned that or kind of even desired that. I was like, you know what, fuck it. Like, little old Nat that grew up on a farm in New Zealand, like, I can do anything I want. Mum said shoot for the stars, so I'm like, fucking the stars it is, And so on the plane ride to Melbourne, I wrote down like, I want to be a millionaire. This is the events that I want to run. These are the group containers that I want to do. And I really had to choose to grow into that version that was going to hold $1 million. So it was this massive transition of like, right, I'm going to run events. And I had never ran events before. And I was so nervous to speak on stage. And I was so nervous to teach my weird galactic woo-woo, spiritual stuff. And although I knew the deepest root cause, like I knew that I had to teach this. So I trusted myself. I went all in on my knowing. I trusted the intuition, and I was led by my beautiful spirit guides down this path of creating an event. So I then created a new identity on this woman who can hold $1 million. So I went through that big identity from probably January to June, which is actually where in June I turned 29, and it was this big pivot that I could feel at the very start of June. So before being Natalie Patterson Coaching, I was actually Starseeds Society, and I had identified my name with that. Like, people were coming up to me being like, you're the Starseed girl. And I was like, yeah, Starseed Society. Like, I was like, this is my brand. I am the brand. And I'd like immersed myself in Starseed Society. I was like, my mission day in, day out was to, awaken other Starseeds so that we could build a society. And I was like, all fucking in. And so I created like such a big identity around Starseed Society. And then it was about June, I started, my spirit guides kept saying to me, Nat, you've got to change into being Natalie Patterson. And I was like, but I don't want to let go of Starseed Society. Like, I've worked so hard for this incredible business, and I'm helping so many Starseeds. And then I've like justifying, like, I did this and I did this and I did this, and I don't want to let it go. And then my spirit guides said it again, like, Nat, you've got to be Natalie Patterson. Like, you've got to own your name and become this new version of you. And I was like, too scary. Too scary to fill those big boots of my own name. No. I will play small. And it was, I then went back to Bali, funnily enough. And whilst I was in Bali, Mama Bali was like, it's all in that. Like, you've got to change. The identity has to shift. So I was like, all right, so I need a new, I wanted a new photo shoot. I wanted new colors. I wanted to rebrand, and I did. And that was a massive identity death. Like, I had to mourn Starseed Society. It was like probably like a 3-week mourning process where I was like, fuck, I really have to let her go. Like, and it was like this entity had to leave me. This being had to leave me. And so I did a big, beautiful ceremony on the beach of just like letting her go and writing a big letter and crying and saying thank you and just allowing what she gave me space, and just being so grateful for that. And then transitioning into Natalie Patterson, who's like this fierce boss bitch who wants to like be a multimillionaire and wants to travel the world being a speaker and has a podcast and does all these things that I didn't realize I actually really wanted and really, really valued. So that was a big identity shift. And then I actually feel like I'm going through this another big identity shift for such a long time. I've been in my masculine basically my whole life, basically my whole 29 years of living. I've been in my masculine. Like I've always been able to hold myself. Even when I've had a partner, they've been super feminine and I've directed everything. I've always had the structure and always been like, what are we doing now? How are we doing this? Da, 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 putting dates and times on everything and being totally in control because my identity has also been the controller, the high achiever. So I've also let that role go this year. I've been like, over the past probably 6 weeks, I've been integrating this feminine essence and I'm like, who is this new evolved Nat that doesn't necessarily want to fully hustle, that wants to just sit and receive, that really wants to express her emotions, that wants to cry all the time. And I'm like, who is this new version? So I've been meeting this new identity and welcoming her in. And you gave me some amazing advice before the podcast, and I thank you for that, of just being like, I have to feel more of my emotions and be open to speaking more about that because this is the new version of me. And I suppose this new woman that I am requires a different outlook than before, which is actually really exciting and also feels like, a massive death. I actually had the weirdest dream last week. Ooh. So I had this really weird dream where it was very violent, very violent. I went into this 2-storied house and I was stabbing this person, like killing this person, right? Stab, like stabbed them like 30 times, blood spurting everywhere. I was like, this is a very graphic, horrific dream. And then I wrapped this person in as a mummy and put it underneath the house. And then when I woke up, I was like, that was really fucked up. And then I sat in meditation and I was like, what does that represent? What does that mean? And it was like, it was a man. I was like stabbing this man. And I was like, oh my God, I literally just killed the masculine that's been literally living within me for such a long time. And I wrapped him as a mummy and put him underneath my house for like, you can be there and still live on, like your spirit can still live on. However, you don't have to live inside me and control me anymore. And I was like, wow, everything is always so connected, right? Yeah. It was, such a wild, wonderful dream.
I really love that. I've been doing a lot of work around dreams. And have
you? Oh my God, of course.
I'm hosting a dream temple.
I'm coming. Tell me when it is. I'm coming.
Next Friday night.
Oh my, where am I? Oh, I'm going to Tony Robbins next week.
Oh,
damn.
There will be more sometime in the future.
I can't wait.
And like, I find dreams so symbolic and metaphoric and like this idea that they can, like for me, they process so much of what we experience. Always. And I've done a few podcasts on this lately about dreams. Cool. And there's like such a depth to them. And I loved what you spoke about grief in the transition because, you know, I think we both talk about quantum leaps and like timeline shifting and all of that. And like, this is such a big fan of the work of changing who we are and stepping onto a new parallel reality that is possible for us to achieve. Yep. And also there's this element of grief that I think doesn't come in quite as much, or we don't, like, it's hard to portray in short form. Yeah. And for me, like, every time I've had that shift, there has been that element of grief where it's like, ooh, letting go of the past and allowing that to come from a place of gratitude. Like earlier this year, I also ended a relationship and like that involved an identity shift and a timeline shift, a quantum leap, an identity change, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And of course, there's grief. And it's not only in a relationship ending, but also the grieving of, you know, maybe it's safe in certain situations within our life. I know for me, stepping into the world of business and building like my business, there was like grief of, like the safety. I'm not supported by a structure outside of myself, and it's only on me. And it's like a grieving of letting go of like a representation of the paternal father of like that's providing for me. But there's this element where when we step into a new identity, that there is a grief.
Yes, and totally. And you have to go to the depth of it to fully process the death of it, right?
Yes. Yeah, if we don't do it, it just kind of hangs around and it's like, oh, if I'm not willing to feel the depth of that, to actually go there in depth. it's going to stay around and linger and be like, hey, have you actually died? Have you actually changed? I'm still here. Ooh, let's bring in them bad habits and like old behaviors.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes.
And I'm curious with you around this because I believe a lot in your work. You talk about the quantum shift.
Yes.
And when I consider this, for me, I speak of it identity shift, and I believe they're the same thing. And on a fundamental level, like it can sound quite woo-woo of like, oh, this is what it is and all of this. But then I like break it down and it's like, oh, all I'm actually doing is behaving in a new way and stepping into that, choosing, making new decisions and changing my fundamental habits that make up my identity and change me. And with that, what's been your experience like? Because I know of the upgrades and the changes you've gone through. So like your own quantum leaps in changing and shifting. Like, what have you noticed in the jump itself, and how much of that has been prepared of like, oh, I've been building towards this, and then a step and off point? Because some people think it's just like, oh, I'm shift from one to the next day. And for me, it's always been
a transition,
a transition. There's been time, there's been space where I've had to go through different habits, or I've like had to have the grief and let go. And it does take time, but then at some point it changes rather quickly.
Yes, I agree. It's kind of like how I kind of see it is it's kind of like the 1%ers all keep stacking up, and then eventually it's like, all right, you're full, boom. And that's the quantum shift just goes boom for me. So yeah, I suppose with like, for instance, Starseeds Society, it came over, I suppose actually if I really was to think about it, over about a 2-month period, I had, Spirit would say, oh, you should let go of Starseed Society. And then someone else would be like, oh, Natalie Patterson, like this is Natalie Patterson. I posted like, this is Natalie Patterson who owns Starseed Society, because a lot of people would introduce me like, oh, this is Natalie Patterson. She's the owner of Starseed Society, where it kind of just like naturally was kind of like, oh, people are just saying my name now. And I hadn't even said anything about letting go of Starseed Society. And yeah, it was kind of like I had started looking at new photos on Pinterest of like, oh, what would a boss babe look like? And then, of course, there would be a girl on my Instagram and I'm like, oh, I really like the way she's doing stuff. So it's kind of like little hints were dropped to me and I was like, oh, that would be cool. So I'd kind of like screenshot her Instagram and be like, I could create something like that. And then I was like, nah. And then actually it was in April. So I had the big identity shift, I suppose, in June. But in April, I was going to a retreat and we had to embody $1 million version of ourselves. And I was in Byron Bay one day and Spirit said to me, go into the shop. And we had to wear a dress that we felt would be $1 million. And I was in this shop and I was trying on all the normal colours I'd wear. Normally wear black, beige, white, cream. That's kind of like what I kind of wear. And the girl said, you should try on this orange dress. I was like, I fucking hate the colour orange. Like, no, thank you. Like, no way am I wearing an orange dress. And she's like, I reckon with your skin tone and your eyes, like orange would pop. And I was like, I love you, babe, but no, like, no, thanks. And then I got into the dressing room. I tried on all these dresses and I was like, oh, I hate them all. She's like, I'm just telling you, just try on this fucking orange dress. And I was like, all right, I'll try on that dress. So I put on this orange dress. I put on these orange earrings and I was like, oh my God, who am I? And I was like, wow, this is the $1 million version of myself, orange. And I was like, I've always hated the color orange. And then of course that week I saw the color orange everywhere. And then one of my friends said, oh, orange is such a cool color, hey? And I was like, okay, Spirit guys, I get it. My new branding color should be orange. I get it, guys. I get it. All right. So then I'd kind of toyed with this idea of like, all right, if I change this identity, I want to shift into using orange. Like I posted my Instagram being black, white, and gold. Maybe it could be black, white, and orange. And I was like, that's a very bold statement. And so then, of course, kind of May came around and I was like thinking about it. June came around and I was like, oh, maybe like the start of June. And then literally when I was in Bali, it was like, Nat, it's go time. So the download came, it was go time. That day I booked a whole wardrobe. Like I literally got a couple of $1,000s worth of clothes sent to my house for the photo shoot. I booked a photographer, booked a photography space, and I was like, right, the new branding's coming. As soon as, and I said to myself, as soon as that new branding comes, as soon as I get those photos and I post it, like that's the new identity shift. And it was like 2 weeks up until then, I was like crying and I was like, I don't know what's going on. And then the day I got my photos, by the way, guys, I spent a lot of money on this photo shoot. And I had like a model come and everything. Like I did things totally differently. I had my hair and makeup done. Like I always just do my hair and makeup myself. I had my hair and makeup done. I had a model come and show me poses. Like I went all out on this photo shoot. I had a dream that my new identity wasn't going to work, that people were going to hate it, that people were going to reject it. So I ended up waking up in the morning feeling so anxious. And I was like, you know what? And I never feel anxious. Like I've done a lot of work now, guys. It's very rare that I feel this way. Woke up feeling so riddled with anxiety and I was like, oh my God, this is a massive stretch. And I called one of my best friends he's totally connected to Source. And I was like, I'm in my own head about this. I don't think I'm going to rebrand. I think I'm going to stay Starseed Society. And he's like, your ego is trying to keep you small. You can keep playing small, but it's not going to work. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, oh my God, what do I do? And he's like, you've got to choose. You've got to choose. And I was like, oh my God, I've got to choose. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to rebrand on my birthday. So I was like, that's big. Like I'm turning 29. I'm going to rebrand on my birthday. So I was like, okay. So that was kind of like mid-June. And then, so at this point, it'd kind of been like 2 months. It'd kind of been lingering. And then the day before my birthday, I was like, I'm ready. Like, I know I'm ready. I chose the date. I committed. I chose it. I woke up that next day and I'm like, guys, new branding, new me. It's my birthday. Like, we're all in. And then everyone was like, whoa, this is so cool. Because I was right behind it, right? The energy was like, yep, I'm all in. And then that was it. I was Natalie Patterson, just Natalie Patterson. And it was almost as if like that day of my birthday, I had already committed to it being the shift. And then that was when the quantum shift went, boop. It was just like that final piece. So yeah, it took a wee while. And then even, the last like 6 weeks I've been integrating this feminine energy. And I do feel like actually now that we're talking about it out loud, so thank you for this. I do really feel like for me to have this, for it to fully click into place, there is a huge piece I have to do around courage, which involves me talking to someone and really truly expressing my deep, deep feelings. And then I think once I do that, it's a choice of like, all right, I actually own that I'm in my feminine energy and my feminine essence, and I'm going to own that this is the next version of me. So I truly feel like it's also a piece of you accepting and acknowledging that you have to own it and then choosing to fully accept it. And then it's like okay, I'm here now.
I feel that so deeply because we're talking about the 1% before,
the 1%,
where it's like 1% stacking up, and then we get to that point and there's a choice here.
Yes.
Because it could have been like, I'm not going to go step through that. Yeah. And I see this where it's like, oh, it could be safe to not rebrand and just
it could be safe.
Stay within my box. And like ultimately there's a choice there. It probably felt quite naturally up until that point of like what was occurring. It was just shifting quite naturally. And I've noticed this in myself. There's a shift occurring and it's subtle at the start. And then there's always been that point where it's like, hey, you have to choose.
You have to choose. That's it.
And like, there's no forcing. It's like, there's a door here, and if you don't step through that door, you will know you didn't.
Yeah.
And I've felt that where it's like, oh, I've had a choice to step through where it's like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing it. For me, like the biggest one coming to mind was before I went into business full time, I got called to a vision quest.
Wow.
And which is like 4 days out in nature, no food, and 8-day retreat. And leading up to it, I was like, fuck, I don't want to like live in the house I'm living in. I don't want to be working the job I'm going to be working. And I chose at that point to quit my job, like move out of my house. And I did that all the day I left for Vision Quest.
Wow.
And so I went out for 8 days and I didn't know where I was coming back to, where I was moving to, but I had a choice in that situation to be like, I could just stay where I didn't enjoy, but I was safe.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that I really want to iterate in this is like, choosing your weird way isn't about like playing it safe and staying in the box. It's got to be like, hey, you've got to rebrand and you've got to be like bold, because that like orange, I don't see many orange brands out there.
Never,
Like also their like rejection of that at the start. I always find that interesting, because when I see in myself when I've rejected something, eventually I get drawn to it. For some reason.
Do you know what? 100%. I always think this as well. Or even as well, rejection and also jealousy. Yeah. Whenever I'm jealous of someone, or I'm like, oh, there's like a rejection feeling here. Like, oh, I don't want to talk to that person because I'm like either jealous or I'm intimidated or something. Every time I feel that, about 4 months, 6 months, whatever months later, it's like I come right around to doing that. It's almost like your soul's like, oh, it shows you like, this actually could be a shiny object here, Natalie, and you should go through this. And then we're like, oh, it's a bit scary yet.
And we were talking about this before the podcast came on, of like the journey of success and wealth, and also feeling like there's a separation that can occur between people, because on this journey there can be that, like jealousy that comes up with others, or separation that occurs as we go on that. And I see this where it's like, when I've been jealous of someone, I agree. It's been like, oh, I've wanted that. Like in the past.
I want that. Yeah, jealousy is just like, I want that, and you can actually have that.
In the past, there's been so much around wealth for me in that. Yeah. I've been like, oh, that person's greedy. They have so much. Yes. And really what it was telling me is like, oh, I desire that for myself. And that's hard to own.
It's hard to own,
like, at the start, it was like, oh, can I say that I want more money?
Yes.
Is that okay? Am I a good person if I claim that? And especially being in spiritual spaces, there can be, conditions. Money is the root of all evil and stuff like that.
The programming's strong for that stuff, isn't it?
And it's like, oh, what is the actual truth here? What is the truth of my desire? And not to be consumed by desire, but also knowing where the desire is leading. Like if we be like, oh, I desire that, I don't need it. There's a big difference. For me, I'm like, oh, I've also been like claiming the desire to be a millionaire lately.
Yes,
and it's like, oh, to say that on here, I'm like, oh, what will people think?
Yeah,
and I know there's a shame to process to actually become that, yet I don't need that. I know I'm going to live a good life anyway.
Yeah.
And for me to move from that place of like, oh, that's a real desire. I can feel the aliveness, the eros, the movement towards that would, create something. I want to see who I become in that journey.
Yeah.
That feels alive.
Nice.
And we need to work through the shame of that, especially when it comes to these bigger things.
Totally. And even like for such a long time, because I've always been in lots of spiritual spaces too, I was like shaming myself for wanting to be rich or wanting to be, or what rich meant, right? And then I really thought about it, when I sat long and hard about like, what does money mean? Like money means resources. Money means like more things that I can do. One of my big goals is to, actually I don't think I've told you this, the new big goal that I've got is in the next 2 years, I want to hire out a stadium and I want 2,000 people to come. And I want to introduce everyone to their spirit guides, and I want to give everyone a light language activation and fully activate 2,000 starseeds in one room. For it just to be this like massive frequency upgrade for humanity, right? And I know for me to hire an arena and have team and have what I need, I'm going to need at least 50K to do that. Maybe even 100K to get bums on seats. So it's like, okay, well, my big mission also requires me to have a lot of resources for me to be able to actually do that and me to actually provide. So for me also, when I started talking about and thinking about the reprogramming of the money stuff, was like, actually, more money means more resources. And if we continue to shame ourselves for our desires, like where will that actually lead me? And what does it cost for me to have that? And then I was like, well, actually, I desire a really big, beautiful home. And if you think about it now, like, fuck, $1 million doesn't even get you a really, really nice house anymore. Like, the house pricing has gone up so much more. So really then I'm like, okay, well, if I then start to re-educate what $1 million means to everyone, then actually we can all be millionaires and then we can all live these awesome fucking lives. and buy whatever crystals we want. Like some of the crystals that I've just bought recently have been expensive fucking crystals, right? Where like 2 years ago, I really wanted to buy these crystals, but I'm like, I'm not going to spend $2,000 on a crystal. Where now I'm like, yeah, fucking no worries. So like more money means more resources. More money means we get to live the desired life that we actually lived. And then if we think about it, like we're spiritual beings having a human experience. Why would we not have the best human experience that we can have? So I'm like, fuck yeah, let's all make a shitload of money and then do cool stuff with it. And so it was a really big reframe that I had to go through and grow through. And yeah, it's funny. I feel like a lot of people that are or do make a lot of money don't talk about this. And when I did start making lots of money, I felt ashamed because I was like, oh my God, now I actually had this abandonment wound came up, and this is totally my own shit that I had to work through was, are my family going to leave me? Are my friends going to leave me because I'm not like them anymore? Yeah. And I felt like this aloneness of, are people going to not like me because I make money? And I was like, oh my God, no one tells me about, no one talks about this. Why do not more people talk about this? And then it's funny, most people, like most of my friends that are really, really, really successful that have hit 7 figures, they've all been through this. And I'm like, wow, it's such like it's like kept under the rug that they talk about this. So I'm like, I'm here to show other people that they can make a lot of money and be totally cool with it. And let's change the stigma around this, and let's change the spiritual communities for everyone being like, yeah, make a lot of money, high five, this is amazing. We all get to live this amazing life together. And also too, like, what can that do for our communities? What can that do for the impact that we're creating on this world, you know? In a few months' time, I'm going to Vegas to a retreat with a whole bunch of other women that are millionaires, and they're all light leaders. Like, we're all creating huge, massive impact on the world. Like, together collectively, we probably help heal 10,000 or 20,000 people at a time. And if I didn't have the resources, then I couldn't go to Vegas to learn from these experts, you know? And it's like, how can we continue to build and grow and also be totally okay with like wanting these things and sharing this and inspiring other people to do so. So yeah, it's been a big journey in myself to let go of the shame around that. And then the more I speak into it, at the start when I first started saying it, I felt a lot of shame. I was like, I want to be a millionaire, but I don't want to say it out loud. And so one thing that I started doing, and I would inspire all of you guys to start doing this, is start to rewire and start to recode your internal reality. So I started looking into the mirror every single day and looking into my left eye and breathing really deeply and starting to say, I'm a millionaire. I'm so worthy of being a millionaire. I'm a millionaire. I'm a millionaire. And then now I actually do it to I'm a multimillionaire. I'm a multimillionaire, because why would we stop at one when we could have 5, darling? So I'm like, darlings, come on. If we want what we want to be wealthy. We want to have time freedom. We want to be able to do whatever we want to. And then, you know, I have a new mentor at the moment. I think he's done about $5 million. And he does really, really, really well. And he actually now speaks about like wealth being time. Yeah. You know, buy your time back and leverage your time, leverage your money, and then once you've done that, once you've really been the embodiment of that, like teach so many other people how to do that. And then, you know, we were talking earlier, like we as coaches or business owners, we've already solved our own problems, so now we can teach other people how to do that. And it's like, I can't wait to be a multimillionaire and then show others how to be multimillionaires too. And already, you know, I've been able to crack some awesome money and help lots of other coaches make a lot of money in their business. And it's now like, cool, I can't wait to be able to crack 1 million and help lots of other people do that too, because really everyone at the top is like helping build their communities out, and there's like so much more impact that's going on. And when I first rocked up to the house to see Dean today, I said to him, dude, like how many people are we changing? Like the next generation that's coming in, like how amazing that they're not going to have to deal with the trauma and the programming and the conditioning that we've had to go through and grow through. They now probably next generation and the next generation to come also, like, because we're all doing this work, like this new age movement, this healing work that we're all doing, like they're going to get to come in with so much spaciousness of like, I want to do this. Cool. Do it. You've got the resources. You've got the tools. You've got the self-motivation now. Do it, you know. It's amazing.
And I think this is a big piece. Like as we're going into this new age, there is a transition which is happening. In the past, like we couldn't follow our purpose and actually have the lifestyle we want. We live in a digital world now where there is the formation of a digital economy, which is going to support people to follow their purpose and give back in the way of service and actually be a self-sustaining economy. And
so cool.
That is going to support so many people to actually follow their purpose, which for me is a big thing. And if we have resistance to wealth of being like, I can't hold this, I can't allow this because that makes me a bad person or that's not welcome, it's going to limit us and it's going to stop a new world actually forming, because that, like, we're going into an age where the school system isn't actually working anymore. It's not teaching us the skills that we need in the world. And in the digital economy, the creator economy, there is actually growing like capacity to learn the skills that we need. And all that requires is finding a course that wants us to learn the skills, going and like finding the mentor, the coach that can help us through that stage. And this adds to that economy that goes beyond what we've known. And this is such a powerful thing where it's like, oh, there's so much more possible. And when we acknowledge money as, like, for me, an energy, a thing that moves, and like you said, it's a tool that we can leverage to buy back time, which I believe like needed, because this world wants to move us really fast. And it's like, do we actually want to do that? Or do we want to slow down and be able to have conversation like this that can support everyone, and we can give back and we can provide and give value? And that for me is so important. And like, the more time I have, the more I can give. I can slow down and give to the person in the street, have that conversation, smile, ask, have a deep conversation that doesn't matter if, you know, other things are happening. And I think this is so, so important. And I feel like we're going to wrap up just in a moment. And before we do, I want to ask, is there any like final piece you want to share for everyone listening, and like whatever that may be alive for you right now?
Okay, what's coming in is, I hope you feel inspired to live out your soul's mission. With the incredible world that we live in, there is so much opportunity. There is so much available for us to really tune into, what do we want? What do we desire, without the programming or the insecurities of what others think, or of the judgment that you put on yourself. Like, if you want to really tune into what do you deeply feel that is true to you, what do you want to do? Find the mentor, find the steps to doing that, because that is what will set your soul on fire. And I know that we both are the embodiment of that. Like, we both are living out our soul's purpose. We're both living out our soul's, mission. And we love our lives and we want to inspire more humans to do that. So what's really alive in me right now is to share with all of you, find your deep purpose. You're a starseed. If you're listening to this, you're a weird fucking starseed by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
And so, know why you're on this earth. You signed a soul contract to come down to earth to play this game. So play the fucking best game you can and enjoy every fucking moment of it as well. So thank you so much for having me on.
Absolute pleasure. And I just want to iterate that. Follow your own thread. Follow like your own soul, because it calls to us. It knows we're here. It wants us to live, and we have the opportunity now. And that is so fucking beautiful. And that is your weird way. But Nat, before we do finish up, is there anything you want to share, or how can people connect with you?
Great, thank you. So if you go to Instagram or TikTok or Facebook, it's Natalie Patterson with 1 T, coaching. And you can find me there. I work with entrepreneurs or spiritual individuals that really want to make huge impact on this earth. So if you feel the call, reach out. Would love to connect with you.
Thank you. And for those listening, all her links will be in the show notes below, so check them out. Connect with us, ask questions, let yourself learn, be curious, and bring your own wonderment to this. Thank you all for joining The Weird Way. It's been a pleasure.